Holt Ranch. Midnight some men bury their dead. Ezekiel Holt buried his past, and he buried it deep. He didn't speak to the wind, didn't name his horses, didn't keep mirrors in the house. Whatever memories flickered behind those pale, gray eyes of his, they stayed locked behind splintered barn doors and rusted gates, just like everything else on Holt Ranch. That night, the wind came first. A cold, dry hush that swept over the land like a ghost running its fingers through brittle grass. Then came the hooves. Faint at first, like distant thunder, then louder. A beat like war drums against the silence. Ezekiel didn't move. He stood barefoot on the porch in nothing but a linen shirt, an old gun belt, eyes fixed on the horizon. His rifle leaned against the doorframe, loaded, cleaned, always ready. The sound of horses grew sharper. Then, out of the dark, they appeared. 10 of them. 10 Apache women, mounted and cloaked in shadows, rode in a wide arc and stopped just beyond the corral fence. Their faces were streaked with dust, their braids bound with leather ties, their eyes sharp and unreadable. They did not speak, did not dismount. The tallest one broad-shouldered with sun-scorched skin and a hawk feather. Behind her left ear stepped forward. She walked to the edge of the porch and reached inside her deerskin satchel. When she pulled it out, Ezekiel's breath hitched. A small bundle wrapped in old cloth. Blood-stained, torn. She said nothing, just extended it. Ezekiel didn't want to touch it, but his hands moved anyway. They always did when the past came knocking. He unwrapped it. A blue ribbon, the kind a mother might tie into a little girl's braid. The kind his wife used to make. The kind they buried with. He dropped to his knees. 12 years ago. The fire had started in the barn. That much, they said, was certain. Some fool's lantern knocked over. Others whispered it was the Apache woman. Said she was cursed, bringing bad spirits and bad luck. They didn't care that she was his wife. Didn't care that she cooked for half of them, birthed his child, healed their sick. All they saw was a dark-skinned woman with quiet ways and no wedding papers. By dawn, the town had burned part of his ranch. By noon, she was gone. By nightfall, he stopped speaking altogether. Present Holt Ranch. The porch groaned as Ezekiel stood back up. His boots thudded on the planks like gunshots in the stillness. I buried this, he muttered. The tall Apache woman cocked her head. Then you buried wrong. Who gave this to you? She did, years ago. Told us if we ever needed help, to find you. She's dead. Maybe, maybe not. You'd be surprised what lives when it's needed. Ezekiel stared at the other women. Younger ones. Mostly, except for a pair of gray-haired elders. One woman's arm was slung in a bloodied cloth. A girl no older than 16 held a knife to her own hip, tense and ready. They hurt? He asked. Some? Chased? Always? Something in him shifted. A weight long kept down rose like smoke from an old fire. Why here? Because. It's still hers. The woman's words dropped like a stone. Ezekiel's jaw tightened. His eyes darted once toward the half-burnt barn, the same barn where she'd last kissed his cheek, where the cradle had once rocked. You can stay the night, he said at last, voice like gravel scraping iron. For one night? The tall one asked. For now. She gave a single nod. Inside the house, Ezekiel led them to the root cellar behind the house. It wasn't much, stone steps, packed earth, cold air. But it was dry, hidden, safe. They moved silently, like spirits slipping beneath the earth. He watched them with a strange ache, some mix of wariness and sorrow, and something older, maybe hope, maybe guilt. Hard to tell anymore. He lit a lantern, placed water on a wooden crate, laid down spare blankets. Didn't say a word. When he turned to go, the tall woman asked, What was her name? His voice caught. Sahil. A long silence passed. We called her River That Sings. I called her wife. Later, on the porch Ezekiel sat on. The porch rail, boots dangling. The night had fallen full. Coyotes called from far off. Stars blinked above, indifferent as ever. He held the blue ribbon in his hand like a sacred thing. His horse, Dust, snorted softly and nudged the porch rail with his nose. You believe in ghosts? He asked the wind. The wind didn't answer. Inside. The Apache women were still, resting, dreaming, maybe plotting, maybe praying. He looked toward the tree line. Far off, near the ridge, a tiny spark flickered and vanished. IRELAGET. Someone was watching. Flashback. The last argument. You said you'd stand by me, she'd said, her eyes wet, angry. I did. You let them burn our home. They were ready to hang me. You should have let them. Then she was gone. That was the last thing she ever said to him. The last thing he ever let himself remember. Midnight again. A visitor comes. The knock was soft. Ezekiel's. Eyes opened. Second knock. Louder. 3 raps. Then silence. He grabbed his rifle and moved silently to the door. Another knock. Not fists. The back of a knuckle. Calm. Cold. He opened it slow. One man stood there. Tall. Clean-shaven. Dusty boots. Pale eyes. Smiling like a man who knew secrets. Evenin', friend, the stranger said. Name's Briggs. I'm looking for some ... Runaways. Indians, mostly. You haven't seen anything strange tonight, have you? Ezekiel said nothing. Not a word. Not even to the wind. Midnight, Holt Ranch porch. Briggs smiled like a rattlesnake. Dust blew between them, swirling low across the porch. Ezekiel didn't blink, didn't move. The old rifle leaned against the doorframe, and Briggs's eyes slid toward it with a slow, deliberate pause. Well? Briggs said, tilting his head. You always been the quiet type, Mr. Holt? Ezekiel's voice finally came, like dry timber breaking. Depends who's a skin. Name's Briggs, the stranger said again. Clayton Briggs. Me and MY men are on a little job, tracking some dangerous property that wandered off. He smiled when he said property. Ezekiel's stomach tightened. 10 Apache women, Briggs went on. Left the reservation last week. Said they was going back to their people. That don't sit right with the army. Ain't legal. Someone might get ideas. He chuckled. What do you want here? Ezekiel asked, just passing through. Thought I saw smoke. Thought maybe someone kind like you'd offer a drink, a tip, or ... erection. Ezekiel stepped outside fully, arms crossed. Ain't nothing here but dirt and ghosts. Briggs smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Well, ghosts are noisy sometimes. Heard tell you used to be married to an Apache woman yourself. What was her name? Ezekiel didn't answer. That's all right, Briggs said. I remember. Sahil, pretty thing. Heard she died in a fire. Or disappeared. Never clear which. His boots stepped softly on the boards. You ever wonder if she ran back to them? Took something with her? Something small, soft ... And worth a hell of a bounty? Ezekiel's jaw clenched. Nice place, this ranch. Shame if something happened to it again. Inside the cellar below ground, the Apache women sat in silence. One of the elders held the wounded girl's hand. Blood had dried into her sleeve. The air was tight with fear, but no one spoke. The youngest girl, no older than 16, pressed her ear to the wood above . She whispered, He's here. Tall Doe didn't flinch. She just held her knife tighter. The decision Ezekiel knew men like Briggs. He'd ridden with them once, years ago, during the war. Men who smiled as they burned villages, who said just following orders, while They laughed about how women screamed. He thought he'd left all that behind. But fire, like memory, always leaves its mark. You travel alone? Ezekiel asked, quiet. Briggs stepped off the porch. Got 5 with me. Camped just down the ridge. Won't take us long to look this place over, just to be sure you're clean. You ain't stepping foot past that fence, Ezekiel said. Briggs turned. You sure about that? Ezekiel's hand dropped to his holster. Briggs grinned again. You got sand. I like that. He walked backward, casual as sin. We'll be back at sunup. Hope you got your story straight, Mr. Holt. He whistled once. A horse appeared out of the dark, as if summoned. Briggs mounted and vanished into the trees. Ezekiel stood there until the wind died. Back inside, confession, he returned to the root cellar and opened the hatch. They stared up at him like cornered wolves. You need to leave, he said. We have nowhere left, said Tall Doe. They burned our last shelter. They'll burn this one too. You owe her, she said. Those 3 words cracked him harder than any bullet. He descended the steps slowly. He hadn't been down here in years. The air still smelled like apples, like old wood and damp sorrow. He crouched near the wounded. Girl, she was shot? He asked. Tall Doe nodded. 2 nights ago, your people tracked us across the flats. Shot her while she ran. Ezekiel looked over the wound. Bullets in deep. If we don't take it out, she'd die. She said your wife taught you healing. Not enough. Enough for this, she said. He sighed. I'll need whiskey. Needle. Hot blade. The women exchanged glances. And light, he added. If they see it, they'll come. Tall Doe met his gaze. Then let them come. At dawn, the fire cracked in the stove. The girl didn't scream once. Ezekiel worked like a surgeon, every motion precise. His hands that once pulled, triggers and held babies, now coaxed life back into flesh. When he pulled the bullet free, the women murmured a prayer. The girl whispered something in Apache. Tall Doe translated. She called you Bear Who Sleeps. She says you woke up. Ezekiel blinked at that. She don't know me. She knows what you carry. Truth comes out that morning. They sat together under the mesquite tree. Behind the barn. Ezekiel told them everything. How he loved Sahil. How he built the ranch for her. How he stood silent when they came, torches in hand, words full of poison. How he watched her run into the smoke with their baby and never went after them. He broke down finally. The tears came like a monsoon, breaking dry earth. One of the older women took his hand. Tall Doe said softly, she forgave you long before you did. The threat returns by noon. A dust cloud formed on the edge of the ridge. Briggs and his men were coming back. The women watched silently from the barn window as Ezekiel loaded shells into his Winchester. You can still run, he told them. We've run enough, Tall Doe said. You're willing to die here? We're willing to live. Ezekiel gave a slow nod. Then we'll fight. They spent the rest of the day preparing. One woman strung wire across the barn doors. Another set traps around the back corral. Ezekiel sharpened knives, positioned rifles, taught them how to fire single shot. They were fast learners. The youngest girl, the one called Little Bird, showed surprising skill. She drew a small carving from her bag, a horse and a rider. Ezekiel blinked. I made this when I was small, she said. He picked it up. His throat closed. He had carved that exact figure. 12 years ago. Little Bird stared at him. My mother told me you were a good man, once. He looked away. I'm trying to be. That night, as the sun bled over the hills, the ranch stood still. Ezekiel sat on the porch, blue ribbon tied. Around his wrist, behind him, 10 Apache women waited, armed, tired, unafraid. A lone owl cried from the hills, and in the distance, The sound of hooves again. The land held its breath. Nothing moved but the long shadows stretching across the dirt yard, reaching like claws from the hills. Ezekiel Holt stood at the edge of his porch, rifle cradled in calloused hands. Behind him, 10 Apache women moved, like wind-blown ghosts, calm, alert, silent. He looked to the hills, and there they were, 5 riders, men with rifles slung carelessly, confident like wolves who've cornered a rabbit. Clayton Briggs rode at the center, straight-backed and smiling that same snake smile. The sun dipped behind the ridge. The last golden light fell on Holt Ranch, and the fire in Ezekiel's blood began to burn. The Parley Briggs dismounted and called out, "Mr. Holt, we thought we might help ourselves to some hospitality tonight." Ezekiel didn't move from the porch. "Not your kind of hospitality," Briggs laughed. "No need for hard feelings. Just send the women out. We'll be on our way. You won't find them." "Oh, we'll find what we need," Briggs said, stepping forward. Behind Ezekiel, Tall Doe appeared in the doorway, rifle in hand, staring straight into Briggs's eyes. Then another woman. Then another dot by the time all 10 stood behind him, Briggs's. Grin had started to fade. He spat. "You ready to die for 'em, old man?" Ezekiel's voice was cold steel. "I died 12 years ago." The first shot, the stillness cracked. Briggs raised his hand to signal an attack, but crack. A single rifle shot rang out. One of Briggs's men tumbled from his saddle, chest blooming red. Ezekiel turned calmly. "Nice shot, little bird." The 16-year-old girl behind the sim. Barn exhaled. She didn't smile. Just reloaded. Briggs dove for cover behind a wagon. Bullets screamed across the yard. And just like that, the ranch was at war. The fight 2 of Briggs's men charged the barn, but tripped over a taut wire. A log trap came down, crushing one. The other staggered up, only to meet the elder. Apache woman's blade under his ribs. Tall Doe rolled under gunfire, aimed from behind a trough, and picked off another rider, trying to circle around the house. Ezekiel fought like a man possessed. He moved through the battlefield like he'd never forgotten how. Kicked open the barn door, fired twice, shouted orders, covered the cellar. Gunpowder filled the air. Horses screamed. The dust danced with sparks and muzzle flashes. One of the Apache girls took a shot to the leg. She grunted, kept crawling, and pulled a pistol from her boot. Shot Briggs's scout in the thigh. Blood, fire, smoke. They fought like people with nothing left to lose. Inside the smoke the battle raged on. Briggs, blood on his face and fury in his eyes, lit a torch and flung it toward the house. The porch caught first. Flames began licking up the columns, hungry. Ezekiel yelled, "Keep them back. Don't let it spread." But the fire didn't care. It was the same fire from 12 years ago, relentless, unforgiving. He ran inside, grabbed a water bucket, tossed it. Flames laughed at him. Tall Doe shouted, "We can't stop it." Ezekiel turned to her. "Get the wounded out. Get them to the hill behind the old barn. I'll cover you. You'll die." He smiled. "Then maybe I'll finally be worth something." Final duel. Man-to-man. Briggs stormed into the barn, revolver in hand. Ezekiel followed. No cover. No tricks. Just firelight and 2 men standing 10 feet apart in the haze. Briggs sneered, sweat mixing with soot. "Why throw your life away? For savages?" Ezekiel didn't answer. He just fired. Briggs dove to the side. The bullet grazed his arm. He fired back, grazing Ezekiel's thigh. Both men stumbled. The flames climbed the hayloft. "Your wife was a traitor," Briggs said through gritted teeth. "She died like one." Ezekiel roared and charged him, tackling him to the ground. They wrestled in smoke and sparks, fists landing. Like thunder, Blood sprayed across old tools and dry hay. A knife glinted, Briggs slashed, but Ezekiel twisted, disarmed him, and plunged the blade into his chest. Briggs coughed once. Then still Dot and the fire roared. Escape, Ezekiel. Limped out of the barn, smoke billowing behind him. The roof collapsed just as he reached the yard. The Apache women were across the ridge, watching. He stumbled forward. Tall Doe and Little Bird ran to him, grabbed his arms, held him up. The house was gone. The barn, a black skeleton. But they had survived. Aftermath, they buried their dead before dawn. 2 Apache women. 1 girl who hadn't spoken a word. Ezekiel carved the headstones himself. He stood by their graves and whispered, "You were braver than me." Tall Doe came beside him. "No, just louder," he chuckled. It was the first time he'd made that sound in over a decade. Revelation? The locket that night. Beneath the stars, Little Bird approached him. She held a tiny carved horse in one hand, and in the other, something small and silver. A locket. Inside. A faded picture. Him. Sahil. A baby wrapped in blue. Ezekiel stared. "Where'd you get this?" "My mother gave it to me before she died." His voice cracked. "What was her name?" She looked up at him with eyes that mirrored his own. "Sahil. She never stopped loving you, even when you forgot how to love yourself." Ezekiel fell to his knees, trembling. Little Bird knelt beside him, and for the first time in a lifetime, he wept with someone, not alone. Ashes drifted in the morning light like tired snowflakes. What had once been Holt Ranch stood as a smoking ruined barn collapsed. House burned to the bones, fences torn and blackened. Yet in the middle of that wreckage stood something whole. Ezekiel. Holt. He leaned against the last standing post of the porch, leg bandaged, shoulders stiff, but eyes bright. Alive, awake, finally. Home. Behind him, the 10 Apache women moved like spirits across the earth, tending to the wounded, setting up shelter with canvas, cloth, and salvaged wood. And somewhere among them, Little Bird was laughing with the others, braid swinging behind. Ezekiel turned toward the graves, freshly dug beneath the cottonwood tree. 3 mounds. 3 lives lost. 3 reasons to fight harder for the rest. He knelt, placed a smooth stone on each grave. One by one, he whispered, "I remember." Rebuilding begins over the next days. Something unexpected took root on that burned land. Life. The women built lean-tos and shade tents beside the ruined barn. They repaired the water pump and dug a new root cellar. They found tools, salvaged lumber, and with Ezekiel's quiet guidance, started to rebuild. And Ezekiel? He didn't sleep much. He was too busy teaching, fixing, hauling, helping. The man who once shut himself in now opened his hands to strangers, to family. Word spreads it. Didn't take long for word to travel to the nearby towns. They whispered it first in saloons and supply stores. That old ghost, Ezekiel Holt, he's alive again. They say he's living with Indians now. Rebuilt his whole place with their help. Briggs didn't come back. Wonder what happened to him. Some came out to see for themselves. At first, they came armed, but they left quiet, humbled. Something about the eyes of those women, and the way Holt stood among them like a man reborn. He wasn't hiding anymore. A place for her one evening, while the sun was setting in long golden bars across the land. Ezekiel handed Little Bird a gift wrapped in cloth. Inside, a notched necklace of turquoise and carved bone, with a tiny silver feather at its center. "I made that for your mother," he said. "She wore it every day," Little Bird whispered. "You look like her," Ezekiel said, voice low. "You ride like her too." Little Bird looked down, then up again. "She always believed you'd come for us, even when I didn't," Ezekiel swallowed. I should have. I didn't, but I'm here now, and if you'll let me, I want to know you, as your father. She nodded. I already do. The law comes knocking a week after the fire. A group of cavalrymen rode in official, armed. Stern dot, they demanded to know what happened to Clayton Briggs and his men. Ezekiel stepped forward. They attacked peaceful women under my protection. They lit my home on fire. I buried them. That's the whole story. The officer Major Henley frowned. You took in fugitives. They're people, and this is their land as much as mine. Henley looked around at the burned ranch, the women working together, and the girl beside Holt with the steel in her spine. After a long pause, he said, There's no crime here I want to chase. Then he turned his horse and left, the ranch reborn by the end of the season. Holt Ranch didn't look the same dot. It looked better. The new house stood tall, wide, with extra rooms. The barn had an Apache mural painted across its doors, a river, a bear, and a rising sun. A community kitchen sat under the trees where everyone ate together. Even neighbors started coming out. A few brought lumber. Some brought livestock. Others just sat quietly, unsure how to say sorry. Ezekiel never asked them to. He just handed them tools. One night, near the fire, the youngest Apache girl asked, What was the ranch like before? Ezekiel looked into the flames. The others leaned in, waiting. He said only one word, empty. And everyone understood. Later, after the children had gone to bed and the stars opened above them, Ezekiel sat alone beneath the cottonwood. Little Bird joined him. She sat beside him, arms around her knees. Do you miss her? She asked. Every day. Does it still hurt? Yes, he said. But now it grows something. It doesn't just burn. She leaned against him, and for the first time, Ezekiel smiled, not because he had to, but because he could. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us, what would you have done if 10 women came to your door at midnight and gave you a second chance at the life you buried?